Okay, last of the sections on the church. Just a note on our upcoming schedule that next week we have a week of catch up to caught up on reading. And then also this week, we're reading some select chapters in this section, chapter 3, and then we skip 4 through 10 and chapters 11 and 12. And then I would note, if you'd like, at the end of chapter 11, Calvin, in sections 11 to 16, and you might even look at sections 6 to 10, but 6 to 10 I think are helpful. 11 to 16 talks about how the Catholic Church, the Pope, have wandered outside of their bounds and are too involved in kind of civil matters. And so, you get some detailed things that we aren't necessarily dealing with. And so you might go through those chapters more quickly. So these chapters, after Calvin in chapters 1 and 2, deals with the biblical realities of who the church is, true and false church, the marks of a true church, and the work of a true church. Now is going to get down more specifically into the various offices of the church. And so chapter 3 has a very helpful section on why God uses men, and not just angels or not just himself, but he's always going through men. And then in chapters 4 through 9, something very helpful, some teaching on what are the offices of the church. And so we've already seen that Calvin is going to name 3. You have elders, and then they're divided into 2 categories. You have the teaching elders or pastors, and the lay elders or ministering elders, and then deacons. And now he's going to talk about those other offices, specifically in Ephesians 4, such as apostles and prophets, and evangelists. And how are we to think about those? And Calvin's going to talk about temporary offices, apostles, and prophets, and why he would call those temporary, and then permanent teachers and pastors. I think that'll be helpful to you. And then towards the end of chapter 3, how is a pastor called? Difference between internal and external. How do we ordain pastors? And again, don't forget, this is the reformers having to figure out again how the church should function. What is the calling of a pastor? Because in Catholic times, these things have become abused and neglected, and so they're having to reset good order in the church in order that the church might be healthy. Then in chapter 11, remember we're skipping chapters 4 through 10. Again, chapters 4 through 10 just deal with things related specifically to the Catholic Church and the errors they're dealing with, and feel free to read them, but he's going to deal a lot with the papacy and the errors of that. So in chapter 11, though, now we're going to get into some actual work in the church, specifically church discipline. What church discipline is, how it's related to the power of the keys in Matthew 18, Matthew 16, the differences between the ecclesiastical sphere, the sphere of the church and its authority, and the civil sphere, and then how church discipline should function, and the purposes of it. So Calvin's very helpful on this. This is a very needed section in the church today. That's an area that's in great neglect. And then in chapter 12, he'll get more into discipline, into some depth on it, especially calling for moderation in discipline, which I thought was a very helpful section. And then at the end of chapter 12, I think in relation to sin, he's going to talk about fasting. What is fasting? What are the purposes of fasting? What are the abuses of fasting? Especially when you get into kind of the superstition of it, or the merit of it, holding it up before God as if it's anything in of ourselves. And that will conclude that section. So I hope it's helpful to you. Again, these chapters, when you talk about the doctrine of the church, it might be boring, and it could be, but it's an area of great neglect in our day. Just any thinking on what the church is, and the church officers, and what the church is supposed to do, especially in relation to discipline. So some very needed and helpful correction. And Calvin's, again, very pastoral and helpful on it. So that's it. Again, next week, nothing. I will not be here this Friday. I'm taking the boys to my father-in-law's hunting. And so I'll maybe send out a text and see if the rest of you want to gather, and you can discuss the chapters on the church. And then, of course, next week is the Friday after Thanksgiving, so we won't meet. And so we'll catch back up with chapter 14, meeting December 3rd, is it? And section on the sacraments. And so hopefully those are all helpful. All right, have a good week of reading. Hope you enjoy it, as I did. God bless. Bye.